the Theosophists? Well, I am. I know a few cons about them, but I don't really know that much about them. This chapter here, the Theosophists in the book from 57, Atlantis and Reign of the Giants, which is a cool name. I was going to read some of this chapter here, just to glean a little insight. Here goes. Madame Blavatsky and her disciples were the object of many jokes, and even fairly serious accusations. I do not want to add to the denigration because around 1880, H.P. Blavatsky, writing in The Secret Doctrine, asserted that there existed in the mountains of southern Mongolia and far northwestern China giant libraries collected by the Buddhist monks and stored in secret caves known only to the initiated. In the early years of the 20th century, Paul Pelliot found some of these caves, which had been walled in and abandoned by the monks, who had been warned of the threatening invasion of the Mongols. These caves had remained intact since the 13th century. Blavatsky was right, and had not exaggerated the wealth or the importance of these Buddhist manuscript collections, containing books in several languages, many of which had not yet been deciphered. Moreover, she had identified the region in which the secret libraries could be found. This proved that Blavatsky had received accurate information from the monks authorized to give it. Therefore, it is also possible that she was well informed regarding many unverifiable points. But we cannot know at what point her imagination intervened, and we cannot know if her informants were not themselves mistaken. The intellectual adventure of Bailly, the mayor of Paris, who was decapitated in 1793, the same one who, on his way to the guillotine, trembled, but only because of the cold, not out of fear, is of the type that gives us pause to think. In 1778, after missionaries, I'm going to make this a little larger, I'm getting old. In 1778, after missionaries brought back from India what appeared to be ancient astronomical tables, of which the Brahmins were very proud, believing they were superior to the Europeans in astronomy, Bailly, who was the king's astronomer, began to examine the tables and do the necessary calculations. He arrived at the unexpected conclusion that the tables bore a constant error in their observations, and that these observations were never made in India. But if we suppose that they were made below the northern 49th parallel, then the calculations are correct. Therefore, Bailly concluded that the Brahmins had inherited these tables from another civilization that lived near the northern 49th parallel. You'll have to excuse my sinuses. Civilization, Atlantis, and placed it in an area where the Gobi Desert is located today. In effect, diligent geologists discovered that this desert had previously been a sea, and that the living conditions around this sea could have favored civilization. Voltaire entered into the fray, and the famous Letters sur Atlantide, Letters on Atlantis, by Bailly and Voltaire, published in 1778, rivaled the letters, Persian letters, in popularity. In other words, we can hardly trust what the Brahmins said about their own history. Moreover, we cannot always trust H.P. Blavatsky. Lastly, she is talking more about Tibet than India. With all this in mind, we need to remember the principal thesis of the Theosophists. And what would that be? And it is fairly reasonable to think that we can find among their beliefs traces of ancient Hindu or Tibetan traditions. According to Horbiger, is that guy's name again? Horbiger. This is what we have for the moment that comes closest to Tibet, the fifth of the great islands of the Tertiary Sea. Thus, we will have touched on them all, albeit from afar. The Andes, Mexico, New Guinea, Abyssinia, and Tibet, all along the chain of human refuges. During the Great Permanent Wave, we will have seen something that varies from one to the other, but which maintains a certain coherence in the Andes, unexplained ruins. In Mexico, a tradition that almost looks scientific. Near New Guinea, the cult of the great stones. Near Abyssinia, the remains of a giant race and giant cattle. Lastly, in India and near Tibet, grand theories. Perhaps that which is the most striking and the most ancient among the Theosophists is the role they attribute to the moon. Like the men of Velikovsky, who inspired H.P. Blavatsky, Tibetans and Hindus consider the moon the mother of earthly races. Once again, the Hindus consider the moon the mother of earthly races. I read that. Once again, the mother of Israel. But there is one, they called the moon Sin. And the mountains that they would go past when the sun went down were called Agag. And that's where we get the word synagogue. But there is one essential difference between the savings of the Pacific and the Indo-Tibetans in Velikovsky. We found something that could be nothing but a decline that would end in nothingness and in the incomprehension of greatly diminished human beings. We noted the existence of the remains of an old civilization, but in conditions where intelligence of the builders was no longer at the level of the surviving institutions. On the contrary, in India and among Theosophists, we note a super-intellectualism to the Western mind. Theosophy is too complicated, and we suspect a priori, I don't know what that word means, let's look it up. These complications cannot continue to parallel reality. Without a doubt, reality is very complicated. But the more the theory is complicated, and the greater the chances that two complications will diverge, and that this occurs at the end of the logical and imaginative process constructed by our intelligence, the more we find ourselves far removed from the things themselves. In short, Europe learned better than India to distrust intelligence and imagination, and to require that there be a constant reference to verifiable facts, or at least imaginable as being facts, no longer only as theories. Thus, natives of Makula are happy to say that the human races are created on the moon, and that the souls of future children descend from the moon in the breasts of their mothers. Theosophists maintain that there are 7 moons, of which only one can be perceived by our current human senses. Moreover, that there are 7 planet Earths, convenient, of which 6 are invisible to us. The 7 astral chains correspond to the 7 divisions of the human soul, and one of each materializing on the corresponding star. From a logical standpoint, this theory is admirably conceived, and all that remains is to prove experimentally that it is true. Proving it is naturally extremely difficult. Proving it is naturally extremely difficult. Okay. Education of the souls on the moon before they descend to Earth. A fundamental idea common to both Velikovsky and H.P. Blavatsky is therefore unavoidably much more complicated among Theosophists. It is hardly appropriate to report the details here. A few quotations on the lunar ancestors of the human races, the lunar Pitris, should suffice, given that the general thesis is very clear and the system very attractive. Let us note in passing that we find in the Zohir spiritual worlds that the parallel of our own, but are hidden from our senses. Zohar, I don't remember what that means. It's got to mean something. Entirely similar to Blavatsky's subtle universes. Let us insist also on the conceiving nature of these coincidences and the way in which they diverge. If a simple man and an excessively complicated intellectual report the same things, observed by such divergent minds, there is every chance that their combined testimony will refer back to reality. Indeed, to think that the savage and the intellectual influenced one another, whatever the direction of this influence, whether from one to the other or vice versa, comes back to postulating a relationship that is so old that it is tantamount to providing our argument. A particularly civilized community in an extraordinarily ancient past becomes believable. Since super-intellectualized civilization needs time to develop, and a state of denigration needs time to advance to any great degree, this is what we are postulating here. And not only between India and the Pacific, but between all 5 hypothetical centers of tertiary civilization. 300,000 years ago, ships that left for Tiwanaku crossed the ocean, which bulged due to the lunar attraction, and headed for New Guinea and Tibet as well as Mexico and Abyssinia. It is no longer surprising that in one of these centers, thus separated, science degenerated, while in another it may have become increasingly systematized, and complicated. Therefore, in this respect, the evidence of the Theosophists is admissible, without venturing into forbidden ground of the 8th sphere, writes H.P. Blavatsky. We must report here a few facts regarding the ancient monads of the lunar chain, the lunar ancestors, that play the primary role in our anthropogenesis. The first fundamental race, the earliest men on earth, were the offspring of the celestial men, properly referred to in Hindu philosophy as the lunar ancestors, and Pitris, of which here are 7 categories organized to form a hierarchy. Therefore, it is the moon that plays the greatest and most important role, both in the creation of the earth itself and in the creation of the human beings that populate the earth. The lunar monads, or Pitris, man's ancestors, became in reality man himself. It is the monads of the evolutionary cycle on the first of the globes who, passing through the entire chain of globes, built the human form, their astral doubles, in a more subtle, refined form, serve as the models upon which nature built physical man. These monads, or divine sparks, are the lunar ancestors, the Pitris themselves. For these lunar spirits must become men to allow their monads to reach a higher level of activity and self-awareness. On the role of the moon in the evolution of the earth and the human race, H.P. Blavatsky develops, well before Horbiger, various unscientific ideas, but which are more evolved than those of the Viennese scholar. On the geological dates, she also provides for her time, 1880, surprising details that agree with the Horbigerian hypothesis. For his hypothesis, you have to hear the chapter titled The Moon. Okay. Last page and a half. She claims the cosmos is 2 billion years old. Volume 2, page 72. She places the creation of man at 18 million years ago, at the end of the secondary period. The geologist, Barron, places the end of the secondary era at 25 million years ago, at 25 million years, and Theosophy believes these early people were civilized. Secondary man will be discovered, and with him his long-forgotten civilizations. Blavatsky knows that Abyssinia was an island. She knows that men were present during the raising of the Andes, and she quotes Father Brazen of Bamberg, who had courageously said, "Traces of traditions found in Mexico, Central America, and Peru give rise to the idea that man existed in these countries at the time of the gigantic raising of the Andes, and retained a memory of this. Naturally, H.P. Blavatsky did not know the Hyperborean theory of gigantism, but her information on the giants must have come from a good source if Hyperborean and her own information are both right. According to Theosophy, early man was not only a giant, but he also had a much lighter body than his successors. One might even consider it too light. Races other than our own existed in very distant geological periods, ethereal races, which had succeeded the men of no corporal substance, the Arupas, who, however, had a shape, dynasties of divine beings. These kings and educators of the third race in arts and science, compared to which of our present day, arithmetic before geometry. Giants that preceded us, pygmies. The freebooters who seized the promised earth found a race that was much taller than they, and called the race giants. But the truly gigantic races disappeared long before Moses, 40,000 years before the Hebrews. The ancestors of these giants were much taller, and 400,000 years before that they were compared to us, like the men of Brobdingnag compared to the Lilliputians. The Atlantes and the intervening years were called the great dragons. Therefore, the denigration is obvious to H.P. Blavatsky, and she also knows about the battles between the good and bad giants, battles of which the Greeks seem to have very bad memories. The antediluvian giants were not all bad. I think they're gonna get planets and people mixed up again. The antediluvian giants were not all bad, as theology would have us believe. There were good giants in those ancient days, and these are not myths. I do think that there were giants. Anyone who wants to make fun of Briareus and Orion should abstain from seeing Karnak or Stonehenge, and even from talking about them. It was the giants who built the great megalithic monuments for the good of man. We came upon this idea at Tiwanaku. There is no reason to believe that these gigantic statues were built stone upon stone using scaffolding. We saw that they were monolithic. They could not have built otherwise, except by the giants, who were the same size as the statues. The wars of the Titans are nothing but legends that originated in the civil war that took place in the Himalayan Khalsa. These are all that is left of the story of the terrible battle between the Son of God and the Son of Darkness, of the fourth and fifth races. Thus we find in this astonishing mixture that H.P. Blavatsky offers of mythology, philosophy, folklore, and poetry, three Hyperborean characteristics of great importance: the influence of the moon, the principal dates of human history, and the gigantism with its degenerations. We cannot completely refuse to take into account what she says about these Tibetan and Hindu sources that go back to antiquity. Her evidence, added to all the other pieces, reinforces them, and at the same time takes on a value that we may not want to give it, as in the case of Plato. Yeah, a lot of people just think everything Plato said was true. And at the end, that's the Theosophists. I always like to read all the sides, you might be able to pick one or two little glimmers of truth up. All right, take care. Planet of Giants. There was a time when giants ruled the earth. These kings had tiny subjects to serve them, same as ours. They were our ancestors. The hypothesis of prehistoric giants is nothing eccentric. It is supported by scientific data that make think. Researcher of the last century puts again mythologies and archaeological facts in balance. 13-foot tall man, that's high, but a 40-foot tall giant is amazing. Here is the skeleton of a 40-foot-tall giant. Unfortunately, it's only a sculpture. Obviously, to check out every hoax is quite a challenge, but all the informations can't be BS. An 800-page book, Forbidden Archaeology, written by Michael Cremo, cites hundreds of cases of that type. Supposing half the cases as mock, what makes a lot? Still 400 pages could be trusted. Why are the archaeologists looking elsewhere? How long will it take until they see what's up? Giants are existing myths to set up in the past, a past not so long ago. To those who think that our recent history can't hide such scoops, we suggest go and see how certain people used electric lamps in ancient Egypt, or in France during the Renaissance, or how the existence of flying machine is testified in antique India, and in Mesopotamia under the reign of Solomon, and even closer to us in England during the 17th century. A researcher of the last century reframes mythology and archaeology facts. I have presented this research. I have myself here to summarize his thesis, moons. According to this researcher, the Earth would have had several moons, each corresponding to a geological era moon. Then the moon is destroyed, and the Earth awaits a new celestial body passes near enough to be captured by its attraction. When the moon is large, or when it is closest to the Earth's gravity decreases. Well, in our case, it would be the polar configuration, but it could be the moon too. While all living things grow, when the moon moves away, or when it is destroyed, the Earth's gravity becomes unbearable for large beings who languish and disappear. This original thesis did not meet with the audience it deserved, because the author has developed another too bold hypothesis to have discredited a little fast. The giant telescopes and satellites are doing efficiently their job of detective of space. They just confirmed recently, in 1964, a law of celestial mechanics discovered by the French scientist Roche in 1850. The natural satellite of a planet cannot, without danger, approach it at a distance inferior 2.75 times its diameter. It has been verified for an asteroid revolving around Mercury, and one can prophesy with certainty that the satellites of Mars are living their last moments. A century later, they still turn around Mars, but their fall is expected to achieve in the coming centuries, the satellites being about 2.7 radii from the planet. Our moon still has a fairly long lifeline, being 170 radii from the Earth. But Mr. Danjon, director of the Paris Observatory, however, thinks it runs the risk and threatens us of crashing into us one day. Unless a cosmic accident causes it to resume its course in space, a fate of a satellite is to crash in its planet, as the fate of any planet is to crash in on its star. Wow. This author's name is Xavier. He just has one name. And he's kind of wild, but I'm looking at it as the polar configuration. That's probably what lowered gravity and made the atmosphere more electric. But I think this guy, he's a hoot. I mean, he's entertaining to read. So I'm going to close it out reading Giants and People of the Sea from him and just, liven things up a little bit. With each orbit, it comes closer. Our distant ancestors, according to tradition, have experienced disaster resulting from the crash of a satellite on the Earth. This satellite was revolving only a few radii away, exerting a considerable attraction on the Earth and determining the gigantism of the nature of men, whose size was 4 meters. Well, it is true we did have giants, but like I said, I think it's more from the polar configuration. But you never know. 4 meters for the last giants. The size of our distant ancestors were much larger. According to tradition, Cyclops were 53 meters tall. Holy smoke. Who else could be stacking a monolith of 200 tons on a small pyramidal rock? Do not think whether it is a natural phenomenon. Only naive geologists can support it. But for a giant 53 meters tall, the thing is a game of skill. The divas of ancient India had a similar size, that of a 20-story building. Because of relatively low gravity, objects were much less weighty, the blood rhythm easier, there was less fatigue for the entire body, and the man then enjoyed an extraordinary longevity. He had more developed brain and faculties, which caused him to acquire a knowledge different from ours. Longevity, better oxygen of the brain, here are the conditions of Eden. and all we lack to become gods again. The construction of giant cities and the transport of monoliths weighing thousands of tons, Machu Picchu, Tiwanaku, Baalbek, Teotihuacan, Giza, etc., can easily be explained both by the titanic force of men and the use of their scientific knowledge, of course, and the extraordinary complexity of cyclopean blocks of the cities of the Andes, some weighing several dozens of tons, do not count less than 20 edges, also finds its justification. It was necessary to the construction resist the crazy attraction of a moon very close to the Earth. The dovetail edges and the unbelievable mass of blocks barely slowed the final attraction of the satellite just before it crashed in on Earth. Everything was flying at that time. The problem was to come back to the ground, as the moon was pulling everything towards it. Well, and like I said, take that with a grain of salt. We know gravity doesn't pull, it pushes. This allows us to date the Andean constructions to the very end of the Tertiary period, i.e., there are 1,500,000 years. It might even be the previous moon. To build Sacsayhuaman, or to move the monolith of Baalbek, they must be at least 4 meters high. 3 meters is 10 feet, so he's thinking about 13 or 14 feet. And if they were 12 meters high, it is even easier. Cyclops of 53 meters would have better served the purpose. Cyclops gave their name to the Cyclopean constructions. These 53 meters high superhumans were extinguished after the disappearance of the second moon, which crashed at the end of the Mesozoic 65 million years ago. In short, if I may say, the cities of the Andes have already seen thousands of civilizations. The Incas have nothing to do with it, neither the civilization before them. It was far, far ago. Tiwanaku was already there at the time of the dinosaurs. As for archaeologists, they prepare a stake for heretics like myself. I advise them to burn their unsealable books so that they can finally serve their cause. Forget them. They do not even deserve the anti-interest that I am to them. Do you know how the giants ended? Let's see. If you would be a real seeker after truth, it is necessary that at least once in your life you doubt as far as possible all things. Rene Descartes. All right, how did the giants end? The end of the giants. The ancient mythologies unanimously describe our origins as the golden age of the good giants, creators, and of the instructors of men. So educated, so powerful, and so kind, they were called gods. When the Bible tells us that the giant gods have created us in their own image, it is the truth. But what it omits to say is that the image is not the size. The good giants wanted us smaller than them, much smaller, because of the enormous gravity which would come and condemn them. During the Silver Age, some giants are still here, but they are no longer gods. They are no longer the good gods, instructors of men, weakened by gravity, which was unbearable to them. They are only concerned by their survival. The Bible is right when it says they have created us in their own image. They wanted to survive through us. However, I consider that the giants are not gods. The giants are the angels. It is some word in French verlan, i.e. reverse slang, formerly called les gens, which gave les gens, i.e. people. Some legends accredit this thesis, like the myth of Ahura Mazda and the flying giants. These giants were the servants of gods, like the angels. Moreover, they had wings, like the angels. In the Bible, some angels, or archangels, are much taller than humans. Anyway, the angels/giants were the servants of the gods. The gods are human size when with humans, but they can be giants if they wish to. The gods change their appearance at will. No sweat. They are gods. They made us at their exact likeness, but much smaller, so that we are better suited for the coming era. Indeed, we have seen how the successive moons, moving closer to the earth, caused the phenomena of gigantism. After the crushing, the surviving giants showed a pitiful appearance. They became vindictive, clumsy. Their movements are slowed. Their heart can no longer send blood to the ends of their great bodies. We know that the giraffe, to overcome this phenomenon, has a second heart to mid-neck that serves as stopover point for good oxygenation to the brain. But the giraffe has had plenty of time to evolve, while the last giants, hit by the collapse of their moon and the sudden appearance of the inconceivable gravity, have had only time to hide in caves. But the gods had foreseen in their genetic labs. Scientists have designed a new species to succeed the giants, a species whose small size would be ideally suited for the future gravity. Thus, these foresight giants have been taken for the former gods, but they were not. With the moon to balance the Earth's gravity, the giants have degenerated in the depths of their caves. They begin to behave badly with human smurfs. They added sleepy, uttering here. They ended sleepy, uttering here and there, roaring grunts to maintain terror. Without humans, the decrepit giants would have starved. They needed large amounts of protein. They introduced a rule, cruel to the human race, but vital to them: the law of human sacrifice. There are many stories in which humans have to feed these ogres, by providing young men and girls alive. King Kong, the modern resurgence of those old myths. The gods are always hungry, never get enough, as this is death, and death ever renewed. Georges Brassens. These giants, who became villains like moths, hidden away in deep caverns, are probably the archetype of the demons in hell, the fallen angels of the Bible, or of Sumer. If there is a god and a devil, isn't it because the giants were so good in the beginning and became so bad in the end? They did not leave us a good impression. The problem of good and evil does take its origin here. The giants have not endured gravity. They are dead, the poor fellows, or escaped to space. Superman and the ogres. Bad giants rejected monsters. Greek mythology shows us a famous one, the Minotaur, hidden at the end of his labyrinth. Note that the myth is generous. It presents us both the fallen giant and the cause of his decline.
Giants. The traditions of peoples all over the world are quite unanimous in asserting that at an earlier time a race of giants lived on the earth, that most of the race were destroyed in great catastrophes, that they were of cruel nature and were ferociously fighting among themselves, that the last of them were exterminated when, after a cataclysm, a migration of peoples brought the forebears of the peoples of today to their new homelands. The Japanese narrate that when their forefathers, after a great catastrophe about 2,500 to 3,000 years ago, came from the continent and invaded the isles, they found their long-legged, furry giants. These giants were called Ainu. The forefathers of the Japanese were defeated in the first encounter, but in the second encounter they were victorious. Ixtil Sakaito described the wandering of the people of the Western Hemisphere in the 4 ages of the world. The first age came to its end in the flood. In the second age, called the Son of the Earthquake, there lived the generation of the giants, which was destroyed in the cataclysm that terminated this age. The third period was the Son of the Wind, called so because at the end of this period, terrible hurricanes annihilated everything. The new inhabitants of the New World were Yulmi and Zikaloka, who came from the east to find a foothold at Patachin. Here they met a number of giants, the last survivors of the second catastrophe. The fourth age was called the Fire Sun because of the great fire that put an end to this epoch. At that time, the Toltecs arrived in the land of the Anahuac, put to flight by the catastrophe. They wandered for 104 years before they settled in their new home. Also, F.L. Gamara, in his Conquista de Mexico, in the chapter about Cinco Soles Q Son Ipidedes, Sonadides, wrote, "The second sun perished when the sky fell upon the earth. The collapse killed all people and every living thing, and they say the giants lived in those days, and that to them belong the bones that our Spaniards have found while digging mines and tombs. From their measure and proportion, it seems that those men were 20 hands tall, a very great stature, but quite certain." The Hebrew scriptures as preserved in the Old Testament and in the Talmud and Midrashim narrate that among the races of the world in the previous age were races of giants, men of great size, tremendous strength and ferocity, who were destroying other races, but also were turning upon each other and destroying themselves. The book of Genesis 6:4 narrates that in the antediluvial time there were giants and the earth in those days. The Greek book of Baruch narrates that over 400,000 of the race of giants were destroyed by the flood. After the flood, there were only a few districts where some of them remained alive. When after a number of centuries another catastrophe ruined the world, and the Israelites left Egypt and sent a few men to explore Palestine, those reported that the people of the land were generally of tall stature, and that besides there we saw giants, the sons of Anak, which came of the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so were we in their sight. This description clearly differentiates between the people of tall stature and the giants, and the supposition the Israelites found in Palestine, a normal race only taller than themselves, and thought them to be giants, is not supported by the text. A similar distinction is made in Deuteronomy 1:28. The people is greater and taller than we, and moreover, we have seen the sons of the Anakim, giants, there. They, a few families, lived in Hebron. Numbers 13:22. At the time when the Israelites approached the fields of Bashan and the Transjordan, only Og, king of Bashan, remained of the remnant of the giants. Joshua 13:12 and Doi 3:11. The other individuals of monstrous size had been annihilated in the meantime. Behold, his bedstead was a bedstead of iron. Is it not Rabbith of the children of Ammon? 9 cubits is the length thereof, and 4 cubits the breadth of it. After the cubit of a man, the text implies that at the time the book of Deuteronomy was written, the bedstead of Og was still in existence, and was a wonder for the onlookers. The giants were the remnant of a race close to extinction. Og was of the remnant of the giants that dwelt Ashtaroth and Edrei. Joshua 12:4. They were also called Emim, or the furious ones. The Emim dwelt therein, Moab of the Transjordan. In times past the people, great and many, and tall as the Anakim, which also were accounted giants, as the Anakim, but Moab calls them Emim. This branch of the giants was already extinct. But the 2 cosmic ages earlier, in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinnah, and Abraham, the patriarch, Imam flourished in the Transjordan. Genesis 14:5.
I found this little article here on ancientorigins.net. I thought I'd add it to give it a little more length. It's to be taken with a grain of salt. Exposing the secret history of giants in the underground Hyperborean Gallery in Romania. With Rosia, Montana being a mining area, a number of interesting discoveries have been unearthed there over the years. One of the most interesting being a skeleton of a 10-meter tall, 32.8-foot giant, which was found in 1976.
About 5,500 years ago, an underground gallery was constructed in the region by the Agathisi. In February 2012, a group of geologists followed the gold vein in the same place. They kept digging until they ended up at the base of the gallery. To their utter surprise, they found a gravestone, which was definitely not made of common rock. The geologists took a sample. The laboratory results revealed that the components of the tombstone included 55% 50-karat gold dust, 15% granite dust, and 30% wolfram. Also, the analysis revealed that the composite rock had been made using a type of technology unknown today. The Hyperborean Gallery, known by the name of the Hyperborean Gallery or Gallery 13, the place of this amazing discovery is located beneath Kornia village. Of other discoveries were made at the site in 1976. However, in the name of security, the anthropological and archaeological discoveries were deemed too unusual and shocking for the time, so the gallery was permanently sealed. The gravestone was not the only unusual item found inside the gallery. On it, archaeologists found a 10-meter, 32.8-foot tall skeleton of a giant. Apparently, the giant had been buried there after his death, with his legs gathered on one side. Lacking the proper equipment necessary to analyze such a find, the skeleton was sent to Moscow. Unfortunately, nothing has been reported about the giant ever since. The discovery of a skeleton that measures 10 meters or 32.8 feet. As for the tombstone, a new series of research was planned to analyze it in 2012. The relic was dug up once again, and measurements showed that it was 6 meters, 19.7 feet wide, 12 meters, 39.4 feet long, and 3 meters, 9.8 feet tall. It weighed almost 1,700 tons and contained somewhere around 900 tons of solid gold. To make a comparison, such a quantity of gold would have required over 20 years of mining work to gather. The last thing known about the gravestone is that it had been cut up into 80 smaller pieces in order to make its transportation possible. As for its destination, it is not known where it lies today. One of the archaeologists working in Gallery 13 took a set of photos with the gravestone and sent them to a paleolinguist, who's unnamed. The latter, emerald green bas-relief writing covering the entire surface of the artifact. The text had been written in 3 parallel rows, which started in the upper left. From there, the writing descended diagonally, similar to a serpent, and formed a spiral around a wolf head. Finally, the script ended in the lower right corner. The unnamed paleolinguist speculated that the unknown writing could be Palestinian, and the discovery with its markings and writing clearly possessed great cultural and historical value. Nevertheless, the gravestone was cut and melted. The state obtained a share of 19 pieces, 31%, as stipulated in the local gold exploitation contract. During the excavation, the lifting of the gravestone also revealed the entrance to a pit. The 4-meter, 13.1 feet diameter pit had a descending spiral stairway, and a milky violet light radiated from the inside. A closer inspection of the stairs made it clear that they looked as if cut into walls of the pit by a laser, and as for the violet light, nobody could determine its source. Curious to find the source of the light and to see what was inside, the paleolinguist descended into the pit, but nobody else proved brave enough to join him. The night passed, and the man never returned from the pit. Ultimately, the army sealed the entry to the pit, as well as the entire Gallery 13 with cement. Those present never talked about the discoveries again, as they had been made to sign confidentiality agreements. Therefore, what lies beyond the staircase of the pit remains a mystery. Romanian giant legends. Depending on the region of Romania where the legends come from, there are different names for the giants. In the Bozerul area, giants are known as Tartars, Tartari. For example, a number of unusually tall skeletons have been uncovered at Scalini in the Bozalui Mountains. For instance, when locals tried to plant apple trees on a hill, they accidentally discovered humanoid skeletons of over 2.4 meters, 8.2 feet tall, along with pottery fragments. Bozalui Mountain. Knowing the local legends, people from the area immediately thought about the Tartars. One of these legends even claims that the mountain formation known as the Pillars of Tainita, Stalpi Tarnite, had actually been built by these giants of old. In the past, the giants were also credited for building 2 large underground halls somewhere beneath the mountain. The strange formation, which can be seen up on the Tainita mountain, resembles a set of stone chairs, as they are found at high altitude and in a highly inaccessible area. Locals claim that Tartars built the chairs to sit down on when they wanted to gather for council. Another legend from Haiteg County tells the tale of 2 giantesses who built 2 cities, one in Deva, the other on the peak of the severed mountain, respectively. Upon the end of the construction, when the giantess from Deva beheld her rival's city and saw it had turned out more beautiful, she became envious. In a moment of rage, she threw a plow towards the mountain citadel, destroying it and severing the top of the mountain at the same time. In this way, the mountain earned its name, being known ever since as the Severed Mountain. In regions such as Teleorman, Jeju, and southern Montania, giants are known as Jidovs. A local legend speaks about a hero going by the name of Novak, who fought a Jidov. Once the giant was defeated, he ran away to save his life, but in his flight he left a mark on the ground. The area has been called Brazdali Novac ever since. In the region there are also other formations called Magiri by locals who believe that these have been built by giants. Giant discoveries in Romania. A number of archaeological discoveries have been made in Giurgiu. For example, it was found that in Arjadava, King Barabista had his first city before he unified the Dacian tribes of the area. Yet, an even more interesting discovery was made between the years 1940 and 1950. In this period, archaeologists unearthed 80 humanoid skeletons, which appeared to be giants. The huge skeletons measured about 4 to 5 meters, 13 to 16 feet in height. Giant skeletons have been unearthed in other parts of the country as well. As one example, in October 1989, 20 giant skeletons were found in Pantalaimon, Labada. Other such discoveries have been unearthed in Palagravni and Satetini, beneath Nigru Vada Monastery, and in the Buseki Mountains, where the existence of a network of underground tunnels surprised workers. Thus, skeletons of giants have been discovered in many places around Romania. To get straight to the point, giants have been discovered in Scalion in Buzău County, Mariuta in Calarazi County, Persani Mountains, Palavragi, Piaticreluli, Tarahetli, Satetini, beneath Nigro Voda Monastery, and in many other places. In Maramirs, the fortress of Wansisti was believed to be the home of giants. At Arjadava, giants with a height of over 5 meters, 16 feet, have been discovered in 80 graves, although most are suddenly lost after being discovered. The secret Romanian giants continue to be unearthed, and that was by Valdororic, the author of Loki, the Trickster Unleashed, and Supernatural in the Land of Count Dracula. That sounds interesting. Valdororic has always been fascinated by the supernatural. Interested in the topic, she has studied many aspects of the enigmatic, always attempting to find logical explanations for the unexplainable. And that was from ancientorigins.net. I'll leave a link below.
Put me on a train. I've got no expectation to pass this way again.
So, cult. Well, I guess everybody was obsessed with it. If you're not interested in death, you don't know what life's about, So, the Egyptians had texts on death, but for good reason, because people were dying, and in droves in the cataclysms. But what else I like about the Chinese stuff is that it validates a lot of what the Bible says. It's just unbelievable. And now that we've seen the Hopewell also validate what the Bible is saying about the sun changing direction and the north being the south and all the stuff that proves why the reason that.
There's a couple of YouTube videos that show that in the Bible stories, Noah and the 8 people that were with Noah are incorporated right in the structure of the writing of the Chinese. There are a few videos that show that.
Correct.
And plain as day.
That's completely correct. They're overt. They're not like wink and a nod. They're very overt references to like Noah's flood, for example.
Slap you right in the face.
Yeah, there's no other interpretation. It's not like you can go, well, maybe they're meaning this. No, it's pretty straightforward. Exactly what it means. One of the words was for like family was a man, his wife, and then 3 sons and 3 daughters. It was like you can't say it's very specific.
Story. That's the Noah story right there. Boom, in your face.
Exactly. And that's the neat thing about the Chinese, aside from all the science. And the other thing about the Chinese, as far as the Chinese sciences go, is some of their best scientific work was all the most ancient stuff. And why is that? Because they could see the plasma, so it hadn't been religified and turned into a superstition at that time. It was exactly what they were seeing in the sky. They were making compasses and seismology instruments with it. They were fascinated with earthquakes. The word for electric shock was the word for earthquake. And now with the Hopewell, with the work that I've put out, we can see that the Hopewell proved that the Earth was upside down and then it went across the North Pole. And people, it's not like I started off in this field. I was an atheist, and in the world of mainstream science, I would have never believed that the Earth was ever any different. I always believed. But the evidence is it's undeniable. The statistical fact of it is that
exactly. The fact is that the ancients tell us what happened.
Can you hear
and
those guys?
I can hear you.
The ancients tell us what happened, but in the 1800s, myths were poo-pooed upon, and now they have a completely different meaning. History, our history in the ancient past, changing that in the 1800s.
Are you AFK?
I'm just listening to Rick. He's speaking my language.
Really good conversations going on, and people aren't angry like that one guy, and I booted him. So.
Well, it's nothing personal to anybody. It has to do with the business and things that I'm doing on a personal endeavor. So
okay, too busy. Gotcha.
Well, it's actually part of the process is avoiding being on social medias. It's actually written into the process of the thing that I'm doing. It's not my program. I didn't design it, but it does work. If you want to be successful in business, look, Peter Sage, he tried. He's in jail, by the way. They didn't just shut him down in terms of hey, you can't build space energy, they sent his ass to jail, and that was a $15 billion deal he was working on. So
Wow.
you think that there aren't some powers trying to stop us from achieving the reaching into space? I mean, maybe he was a crook, but I mean, all of a sudden he was a crook, or was it because now he was getting $15 billion to get it together to harness space energy? So I have to the thing that I'm doing, the way that I'm trying to increase position, is a serious matter, and I have to take it seriously because, of course, my house and
Sorry
family is
I
on the line.
asked.
Mankind is on the line. I mean, what I'm doing is some serious work. It's more important than writing papers.
Right.
Not that I don't enjoy writing the papers, but it's just it's a hardcore endeavor, and obviously no one else is in the community is kind of fit to or desiring to do that. So who's going to go out and do it? Because Peter Sage, they locked his ass up.
Right.
And that, think about that. He was legit building a company to harness space energy, and they threw his ass in the jail. I mean, that's where he is right now. So, I mean, I can't be screwing around with these forces. If I'm going to do the science, I got to do it. And so I've taken it very seriously. And I'm trying to stay away. Of course, sometimes it's hard. I have a lot of opinions politically, and it could get me in trouble, but right now it's working. The bankers and stuff, they seem to like me, so we'll see. It's early days. I mean, the game is early.
Right.
I mean, it could all be screwed up still, and then I'd have to go live in the Amazon as a recluse. You know what I mean? Like, I can still screw it all up.
Right.
It's early days for the game that I'm playing. And it's not that I don't enjoy doing this kind of science and obviously talking with you fellers, but it's just that somebody's got to do it, and we can't rely on the system to do it because they don't have any incentive to question their assumptions, and they certainly love hiding the truth. I mean, it's like they can't stop lying. I don't know what the hell's wrong with these guys. It's like this is some of the best information. Who wouldn't be interested in this stuff? Of course, the elites know. They know.
We'll have to talk more about this later on when we're not being recorded. So.
Yeah. Well,
I'd like to help you if I can, but there's I'm limited to a few things that I can only do, right? So.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into the specifics of what I'm up to anyway. But I'm just saying, like, there's a reason I stepped away from social.
Yeah, I understand, Raymond. I understand.
Okay. I hope that they aren't hearing too much of my rantings.
No.
Americans, it is one of my big goals in life to write an epic, an EU based epic that starts with the Younger Dryas period and goes forward into all the way through the Arthurians, and does sort of what Thom did, and actually introduces people into this world because
his focus is on North America, is what you're saying, right?
Well, I mean, his focus was on the Welsh Indians. The reason why I choose that is because it's more mysterious than the Egyptians. The Egyptian, if you use the Egyptians, they're going to say, well, here's the translations, and this is why you're wrong. But if you use a culture that we have no written language for, it's pretty hard for them to do any. All they can do is attack the stones, and it's pretty hard to argue with a stone. Now they could do it, and they have.
Yeah.
Or they just
yeah.
And
they
treat you like
they just call it fake.
Right, they call it fake. But in the end, you could still bring it to Hollywood and still get something done, because Hollywood, they haven't made these stories just because nobody's told them. I mean, they'll turn almost anything into a story if they think they can make money on it. And if Avatar is any indication, people are thirsting for this stuff because Avatar is full of Saturnian references. It's just plumb full of it, from the daggone whole planet being surrounding a gas giant to the Native American stuff. I mean, it's just all sorts of. It's just because
he giant in stature, apparently.
Yes, and he went down to South America and he learned from these real tribes, and they told him the skinny. And to his credit, he listened and he put that stuff in there, and people loved it to death. I mean, just like Star Wars, it's that same hypothesis that I said before. anytime we touch it, people go crazy for it. That's why the Iliad and the Odyssey survived, because they are Arthurian, or I mean, Saturnian stories. And anything that touches the real history, people resonate with. When they get away from it, people go away. Wonder
Exactly.
Woman.
You said the right word. Resonate. It touches you inside,
Yes,
from the genetic memory that we all carry.
that's right. That's right. And people, not that Wonder Woman wasn't a good film. It was a good film, but one of the reasons it's keys to success is that it played off of the same daggone themes. I mean, you're talking
It's
Aries and
the Venus story.
yes, exactly. And people still resonate. It's unbelievable, but we do. We haven't gotten over it. And
That's why Batwoman or Batgirl is such a flop. I mean, it's considered kind of a joke in the comic industry, right? It's like, well, it was in the ancient past. It was not in the ancient past. In the old days, and in the 60s and 70s, like Batgirl was comical. She'd get beat up on, she'd be grabbed, and Batman and Robin would have to come and save her. And yeah, I mean, it doesn't follow the same story that Wonder Woman does, and that's why Wonder Woman is so successful.
yes. In my opinion, it matters to people a great deal. When Thor arrives on screen in the first in the Infinity War, I mean, there's video compilations of people cheering for this moment, because people connect to the god still. I mean, it's in it's unbelievable.
What's the bridge called? The what?
The Bifrost.
When the Bifrost drops him off on the planet, that's when everybody freaked out, right?
Yeah. Well, he transports with his new blade, and he suddenly appears on the battle scene, and just people just go crazy. There's the whole, like I say, compilation videos of people reacting to Thor arriving. And this is not a lot of people. I do have people come into the clinic sometimes that have on Thor rings, but it's not really common. You can't say that it's an active religion, in my opinion, at least not here, maybe in Scandinavia. But people resonate with it. And why do they resonate with it? It hasn't completely gone away from our DNA. And my maintenance is that when these Arthurian and like Maddox people and lost Roman legions and lost Hebrew tribes, when they came here, yeah, of course they were different races and they might have had some difficulties getting along, but as far as they were concerned, these were long lost kindred. Whereas the other natives, they also had the same religion, but they saw things differently. And but as long as the commerce was working, I think that probably things were allowed to continue. But as soon as the Roman legion got here and they started to stifle the commerce flow of the ancient triangle trade, in my opinion, it was a triangle trade that went all the way down to South America. That's when they said, okay, gotta wipe you out. And it had to have been, if you're going to defeat people with armor and horses and stone forts and the knowledge of European warfare, if you're going to defeat them and wipe them out at the Falls of the Ohio, you had to have a really big coalition. So, I mean, the idea that South Americans didn't come and mingle with North Americans is so laughable. It's just unrealistic. And this is all archaeology. It's just got to go. This version of archaeology that treats natives like they are unsophisticated boors who didn't know anything about commerce and they're just running around in loincloths is so stupid. They have it at the Cahokia. If you go to the Cahokia, they've got all the people. They have an actual picture of people from the Midwest, and of course they're dressed beautifully. But in all the displays, they're all naked, and the women are naked. I'm like, daggone it, this is just plain wrong. These were sophisticated people with sophisticated trade routes and relationships. They may have even had contracts. I mean, if the Sumerians had contracts 6,000 years ago. In what looks like alien language, why wouldn't Native Americans be able to do that? I mean, if they can have moon compasses and all this stuff, according to the archaeologists, why wouldn't they have sophisticated relationships, basically Tudor-like, alliances, just like we see with the Habsburgs. I mean, it was definitely advanced, and it was based in something relatable. And of course there were hunter gatherers, but that wasn't the only thing. I mean, even Europeans were still hunter gatherers. When Appalachians, up until very recently, actually, a lot of Appalachians went out and foraged for not only food but medicine. I mean, right up into the late 20th century, I've met herbalists. So that in hunter gatherers all over. Anyways, I'm rambling.
No, it's cool.
No, that's fine. I'm just watching Infinity Wars, Thor's arrival in Wakanda there. Yeah, carry on.
So they can get kind of, and especially on a hot day, so they can get a feeling, because that ancient empire is still there. I felt the chi of it when I was there. I told myself there's no way that this wasn't an ancient fort and that it wasn't for a very powerful nation of imperial commercial. And now, were they Phoenicians? Were they Egyptians? Were they Atlanteans? I have no idea. I can't tell you. All I can tell you is it wasn't the Welsh. It was too big. It's way too big. He's not defendable.
I believe it was an Atlantean culture, like pre-devastating events.
It's long enough ago that because of how wet the environment is there, that all the evidence has been eroded and corroded away, and that leads the archaeologists to say, well, see, no one was here, and it's like, what the hell are you talking about? This is very obviously a fortification. The funny thing is, the other Maddox site, the stone fort in Georgia, is totally not a fortification at all, and the archaeologists are right about that. But what they don't understand is what it is, because it's a Venus meeting Mars effigy, the same as at Avebury and at the Portsmouth, Ohio. What used to be there until, of course, they destroyed all of the mounds there, and it's the meeting of those two comets. Coming together and dancing or fighting, and depending on which culture you came from. And there would have been stone circles in the middle of that effigy, double-ended. It's two snake heads coming together. So you have an EU site there, and then you have this ancient empire site at the old stone fort in Tennessee. So the alt stream has been misinterpreting things for also 150 years. So between the two of them, everybody's been screwed.
I'm so confused.
Well, why wouldn't you be? And they don't even teach it in schools. That's what's incredibly sad. The Berea Indian Fort here in Kentucky, in 1918, there was only one archaeology study ever done on that site that's been published. And there were all sorts of walls still left, not many, but certainly more. Now there's barely anything left. Well, who's been stealing the stone off of there? It's the worst hike for you to carry stones up and down. So they had to have gotten archaeology students up there to physically carry the stones. I don't know, did they do it in the middle of the night or close the park down or whatever, but where are the stones going? Because there's no farms that are going to climb a 900-foot mountain in order to get stones that they can get out of their own farm. It's just it's tragic, is what it is.
Yeah, it's weird. The erasure of some of the history of North America. You didn't want to get into the giants, but I'm talking about the giants.
I like the giants.
1800s. In the 1800s, there was so many accounts of giants being found, and some photographs, and it's all gone. All of the evidence is gone. I don't know what the heck they did with it. Whether they, like Indiana Jones, put it in a box and put it deep in a vault somewhere. I don't know, but.
Yeah.
It definitely threatened some power structure. Was it the Egyptologists? Was it the?
I think it threatened the Darwin story, my friend. It was it didn't want any kind of evidence to support the Bible story that giants were here in the past.
In a world that they only deal with white swans, there are no black swans allowed. that don't fit the narrative.
I'll tell you what I think is the key is if we can get. So they're decommissioning the chemical base where the Kentucky alignment is, and I've talked about the alignment there at the Bluegrass Army Depot. So that is on its way. We don't know when they're going to finish decommissioning. They are actively getting rid of all the VX gas. Now, what are they going to do with that site? Because it won't be a top secret site anymore? Are they going to open it up for tourism? Are they going to keep people away from the mounds? I mean, what are they going to do? But we should be able to.
I'm going to keep this till I get it right.
We should be able to do some FOIA requests to try and get access to information about why they chose to build a top secret chemical base right over top of an archaeology site, which is very obviously Welsh. The shape of the mounds has been made into a Christian cross, and the alignment is absolutely beautiful because they use Cygnus, and we know it's Cygnus because they put Lyra there to make sure we know. But if the government knew it was there, and you can see on the LiDAR that they know that those are mounds because they built the warehouses, the chemical warehouses around the mounds. So, but why did they choose the site? I mean, who made them choose that site for this chemical base? It's kind of an odd thing to do. You know, what were they trying to accomplish in choosing?
They've done it in Egypt too. They've taken over one of those pyramids and they just dumping crap into the shaft. It's a garbage dump.
But I assume some of that is the cultural destruction that follows radical Islamization. Over here, after Thomas Jefferson and his worry about the British wanting to invade, I don't get it, because the late 1800s, there was no chance that Britain was about to come over and take over America. So why did they feel a need to destroy the fort at Charlestown State Park? And why, when you go to Charlestown State Park, you're not allowed to climb on the Devil's Backbone? Now Lee's been on it, but he's old as the dirt, so he's able, he's known all sorts of people all over the place. He's been able to get access. But I went over there to Indiana, I asked, and they said you can't go up there. And if I hadn't had my kids, I'd have just done it anyways. But what's their excuse? It's a state park, right? What are they covering up, or why? Is it just the habit of covering up? Can we not get away from the habit of covering things up? I mean, what the frick's the deal?
There's something up there they don't want us to see.
Yeah, it's like the X-Files. I'm watching
Hey,
a lot of the
that
X-Files.
reminds me. I want to ask you both something. Do you put any stock into the whole entrance to the inner Earth at the poles?
No, that's not how my Hollow Earth theory works.
How does your Hollow Earth theory work? I mean, I've heard that we can't even look at the North and South Pole. In the paper, The Plasma Electromagnetic Sky, I cover what I call the Hygieine theory, the hollow, expanding, growing electromagnetic Earth. And I conjecture that the Earth's core is not exactly hollow, but not iron, and that it is. Right. I don't think so either.
It is receiving energy from Earthling current.
It may be iron, but in plasma form. Hot enough that have been broke down into plasma form and still makes that magnetic field.
The Earth's rocks are charged over 100 times more than the Earth's magnetic field could have charged it. So it had to be charged by another body.
I mean, there's a lot of ways to skin the cat, but what we do know is that the core appears to be manufacturing water. And so the Earth, its mass is different, its diameter is changing, and there's more interesting causes. I don't know what all the causes of earthquakes are, but certainly I don't think it's only plate tectonics. But I'm not going to say that there's no plate tectonics.
Well, Ray, we know the sun creates hydrogen. We know the sun creates oxygen, and it's not out of the question if the plasmoid in the center of the planet does the same thing, then it's pushing elements out from the inside of the Earth as well.
Right. Right, and it could also be capturing neutrino and other cosmic ray energy, and that could be causing the growth. What I call it, I call it the thermoelectric vine, because it enters on both sides of the planet, and
I'm with you.
and it creates a growing effect that is just like a tomato ripening on the vine. I mean, the planet starts to peel seams.
We see more seams at the bottom of the planet than we do at the top. So if the Earth was smaller before in the past, it broke at the bottom, and it kind of curved a little bit less at the North Pole and the Northern Hemisphere area.
Well, I think that around the time Saturn flared, the Earth gained a whole lot of mass at once. Sediment, water, and salt.
And I'd say that the growth rate has changed as we've had different stars. And Jupiter, obviously, that must have been even more stretching because there were a lot more earthquakes at that time. And a lot of volcanoes were more active, like at Mount Ararat, for example.
More energy. Yeah.
Clearly, they're pattern. But it's feeding in and it's causing tears, and there's not enough subduction zones to take up all that mass. So where did the continent of Mu go? Where did Doggerland go? I mean, they sank because there's deformation in the plates. And the deformation in the plates, there's also change in direction in the plates. And that's all been measured with standard geological science. They can't argue that anymore. Like diffusion.
I'm guessing Pangea was only about 40,000 years ago, maybe 20,000 years ago. Thunderbolts of the gods may have grabbed those and broke it up and moved it around.
I don't think we're 4 billion years old. That's what I'm not going to go with 4 billion years old. And I don't think they can either, because the oldest rock, according to them, according to their own science, the oldest rock that you can find on this planet is 3 billion years old. So where did they get 4 billion years? I don't even know.
Don't forget they've carbon dated brand new lava, and it was 100 million years old. Hello?
Yeah. They're definitely a huge problem